Yeah, you're in the right place.
Ah, perfect, perfect. There's only one way to go.
You made it.
I made it, yes, very much so. Thank you, Louise, by the way. Really interesting presentation. And for throwing down the gauntlet, because I can no longer say tere hommikust. So I'm going to have to be original and say tere päevast. There you go. So I love your language too, and it's close to the holidays. I'm glad it's a couple months before, so I don't have to say Yule, because I still never do that, but yeah. Yeah, I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about the actual technologies in relation to some of the media technology companies that we're all familiar with. So when the organizing team asked me to present some case studies, or at least voice over some of my experiences working with some of the big American tech firms, as well as universities, etc. Happy to do that, of course, in the context of the bigger trends that Louise talked about. So with that in mind, a little bit about myself, not of course that this is what it's about, but why the heck am I standing here and talking to you? I've been in innovation, which is a horribly fashionable term, for 20 years now, from my academic career to the private sector. And I wanted to be in all the different seats around the innovation table, to be a proper innovation leader. What does that mean? It means startups as a founder, it means agencies where you're outside consultants, the government, so to really understand public-private collaboration, as well as supporting in case of market failure. And finally, some of the bigger companies as well, either through agency work or at a big company where I am right now. So in the past couple of years, working at Huge and IDEO, those are digital and innovation agencies out of New York, helping some of the largest Fortune 500 companies, as well as startups and academia in their innovation and transformation efforts. So I'm going to talk to you specifically about my work with Disney, Hulu, which is, of course, partly owned by Disney, Facebook, and finally MIT, where I have a background as well in terms of an MBA, as well as collaboration research at the Media Lab. Right now, I'm the Global Director of Innovation for Arcadis. So what I just mentioned, at the other agencies, I've helped a number of companies transform from their old school way of working in the 20th century to the 21st century realities. Think about the traditional industries that were really early adopters of new technologies. So that's, of course, tech, but then you have media, retail, most recently banking. All of that has been turned upside down as we flipped the perspective from whatever companies decide to make and offer you to whatever individuals and consumers are demanding from these companies in terms of services. So unless you can create that frictionless mullet experience, I've never heard that analogy before, but I like it, really complicated stuff happening in the back, but something really easy to understand, frictionless in people's faces. And so after having done that for a couple of years, I was really interested in joining a company that is yet to make that transition in the final, or sort of the last industry that is disrupted by digital, and that's construction engineering. And because of the physical nature of that industry and the long product life cycles, they've been sort of shielded from that kind of disruption until now. So you see the fastest growing amount of venture capital going into this industry, and it's really affecting the big companies that are currently leading the market. And Arcadis actually, when you were presenting, I looked it up, Arcadis actually was the engineering company that got the Doha Metro assignment. So that's, I'm glad to hear that we're actually on the innovation track. If you think about the basics of digital, of course, technology has been developing exponentially. I'm sure many of you are familiar with that. The famous example of the chessboard problem, the grains of rice that you double, and then by the time you hit the final square on the chessboard, you end up with, I think it was 18 quintillion, or like 18 with 18 zeros, grains of rice, which shows what exponential power really is in the context of technological development. So to put it in perspective, does anybody know what this is? It's next to the Forum Romanum in Rome, which is the first shopping street of the modern era. Right? It took 2,000 years to change from this to this. It's still a street. Yes, sure, we put buildings next to it, and you go in, and that's where you do your shopping. And of course, in recent years, this is pretty much what the shop looks like, unless it's an experience environment, which is what shops are becoming. But these guys are doing the shopping, and we're just sitting on the couch. Right? All of this happened in the last 10 years, which is crazy if you think about it in that perspective. No presentation's ever complete without Steve. So here's a slide that has Steve. Words of wisdom. When people hear design, they think, okay, design is just about how it looks. And he was really right to point out, no, in design, you think through the human element. Something has to be frictionless, something has to be intuitive, fun even, delightful experience. So design is about how it works. You have to think through the interaction. And interaction is human-computer interaction, which means you leverage technology and design to create a proper experience. So if you think about that iPad that they released in 2010, and Google Chrome as a browser in 2010, pretty much icon-based, personalized browsing to make it frictionless, right? To make it easy to understand, transcend language barriers, because it used to be just text links that you had to scroll through and a bunch of that stuff you didn't need on an everyday basis. So this is just some autobiographical stuff where in 2007 the iPhone was released as a way to browse the internet with applications. And in 2001 I launched a similar platform which was called Completia, but that was around the time of the first internet bubble bursting. So we had amazing traction in the Netherlands, where I'm from. And then, of course, once everything burst, then it was impossible to keep the doors open and the lights burning, because funding for anything internet-related became impossible. But that's very much part of anticipating what is possible with technologies. So we were actually already programming for mobile devices to put this system on mobile devices to make it easier for people and to personalize it. So that was the big essence there. But at the same time, you need to get the timing right. So be ready for when stuff like this comes. But it was a really valuable lesson in terms of make sure that you're not too early with certain initiatives, because it's all about when people are ready for it. Same thing with the drones, right? If you were to start a drone company now, it might be the best thing ever. But if people don't want drones falling on their heads, even though it will never happen, if that's what they're afraid of, they will not adopt it. But in essence, what the internet or what this kind of digital environment allowed us to do is to switch, like I just said, from having a business strategy and then setting out operations and defining the technologies you need and the processes and having this like multi-year rollout plan, which is what traditional companies used to do, which is what led to success in the 20th century, basically all of a sudden turned upside down, which means you start with the human, the user, the client, and through an interface, they connect with you. That's where you do business. So it's about the user experience, the interaction design, that makes all the difference. You're either relevant in the first 5 seconds or you're not. And that means that informs the expertise you need, the data you need, the technology you need, the operations you need to have in place, and eventually what kind of corporate strategy you need to develop. It's really unsettling for a lot of leaders who have worked really hard for decades to get to where they are, to now discover that their say in strategy development is actually very limited. So that put design thinking on the map in boards. And all of a sudden, it was no longer something someone did. It's cute, it's design thinking, it's creative. No, design thinking is strategy. You have to think like a designer in terms of problem solving to make sure that you're building the right long-term view on things. What is design thinking? I just put it up here as a definition to put it in context. It is a proven, repeatable, user-centric problem-solving process to innovate and have impact. Right? It's innovate with impact. This is what it looks like. I'm sure many of you are familiar with it. It's really assuming you don't know anything. And that's another thing that most leaders struggle with. If you be honest with yourself, right, that's really, you would like to think that experience counts for something, and of course that does count for something. It's data. It gives you that gut feel that you know what needs to be done. But in essence, empathy, as Louise also mentioned, is really about the human experience. Getting into the shoes of your clients, your stakeholders, people in other industries to draw inspiration from there. Then defining what the problem actually is, which might be completely different from what you have in mind when you start. And then you specifically ideate towards that idea, towards that problem statement. And the goal of ideation or brainstorming is very much quantity of ideas. Right? That's another thing to think about. Is really, if you brainstorm for an hour, you should end up with 100 ideas that might not at all be feasible. But that's okay at that stage. You start prototyping, and eventually, through testing, you end up with a solution that is the optimum. And of course, you have to iterate. This is very much about, you're not going to get it right the first time. You're going to have to test and learn really, really fast to end up here. The optimum between what people want, which is traditionally the design domain, and what is technologically feasible. So what can be done? How can we leverage new technologies to deliver that experience or to meet that need? And then creating a business model to make it sustainable. Because, of course, not everything is charity, not everything should cost money. This is a way to capture the value that you create in the experience. Now, the best companies right now, they understand that this is what's changing fast. right? How do we leverage new technologies to create new experiences, to create value and capture value? So ironically enough, the big tech companies are not tech companies. They focus very much on what people want. Right? So they're excellent at creating that frictionless experience. But they are very much aware of how that might change in the future. It's a winner-takes-all market. That's one of the characteristics of digital. If you find something that works, you can scale instantly. It used to be physical in nature, there used to be supply chains, distribution channels, really, really hard to capture a large market share. And in digital, if you create the right kind of experience, you will have a growing number of customers through the network effect. And of course, who knows really well how to do this? The FANGs. You talked about big six. I'm curious what the sixth one is. Is that Microsoft or Tesla? Microsoft. All right, cool. So Facebook, Amazon, Apple, Netflix, and Google, they get this. They all have their area of expertise, but they create an experience for people that is invaluable. And they understand where technology is going and how that might enable them to create more value. Specifically, because I've been asked to talk about media and media technology, let's look at Netflix. Right? Netflix's popularity is accelerating. Who here likes Netflix? There you go. There you go. And is it the content or is it the convenience? Both? Perfect, right? That's what you need. And it shows in the numbers. They've been growing really steadily, I think, since they really started offering the experience online in 2008-9. And of course, through international expansion, that's where you get the acceleration curve. But there's really no stopping them. It's the network effect too, right? It's so easy to sign up. It's so easy to sign up and to start your experience with Netflix because you can be on the couch and just do everything through Apple TV or some other medium. And another thing is their digital native experience allows them to capture all the relevant data. That they know so much about you, which is also the essence of some of the TV series they created, like House of Cards, is that they know more about what you like than you do. And they discovered that everybody loves Kevin Spacey. I'm not sure if that's still the case, but okay. And political dramas. And so they created this experience based on that. And that gave them a leg up to every other media company out there. And it's sort of because it's a winner-takes-all nature, they accelerate as a result of that. It's really hard to catch up with them. It's the opposite of someone who's a front runner will eventually fall behind or eventually be like everybody else. They really have that accelerating data advantage. So this is an experience they rolled out, I think, last year to make sure that they were more accurate in their predictions about what you like. The downside of that is, of course, is everything's so personalized, you're in your little bubble. That's what Facebook is suffering from, right? You only get to see what you like, and you don't get to discover anything new, and that's the balance, right? You want to, I think the goal for Reed Hastings, who's the CEO of Netflix, is you just turn on your TV, and the thing is playing that you want to see at that moment in time, which is almost an impossible task, but that's what he considers the holy grail of the Netflix experience. But do you want that? Or do you want to watch something, you're like, what the heck is this? And you keep watching it, you're like, it's kind of interesting. Because we're humans, right? We're not flawless. We don't like everything to be perfect. So that's a risk that they're running. Now, you can see because they're learning, they're creating more value. It's becoming more interesting for people to sign up. And this is the market cap, the value of Netflix in relation to Disney. So Mickey's sweating because they're about to catch up. So they had to do something. So I worked with Disney in 2013, 2015, and then recently again, based on their experiences. Bob Iger, the CEO, really understood where all this was going. It's like we have to become, to some extent, a tech-enabled company. And we've innovated throughout the history of Disney. We can do this too. Content, that's their magic play, right? They have the best content. So the first thing he did as CEO, when he took over from Michael Eisner in 2005, is buy Pixar. And then he went on a buying spree with Lucasfilm, Marvel before that. So spending billions of dollars to make sure that the content catalog was actually there and would be unrivaled. So with the exception of Netflix now, who's investing heavily in creating their own content, they are king when it comes to content, also on the TV side. But they need a distribution channel. And everything is now on Netflix, and they're going to pull back from Netflix because whoever owns the platform owns the relationship with the customer. And there's a lot of value in that. And Disney's big enough, and they have content that's famous enough to still enter the game of the platform, of the streaming platform arena. And they're already part owner, I think by now majority owner, specifically through the Fox acquisition that they recently did of Hulu. And Hulu was the original streaming platform of last night's TV. That was kind of the catchphrase at the time. So before Netflix really took off, Hulu was already offering a similar experience. So I worked on the Hulu redesign to create a better experience that was more intuitive, more frictionless, and also more personal. And this is what was rolled out last year in terms of minimalist approach, no clutter, no BS, just the content you would like to see, with autoplay, of course, in the background, so it's already showing the content that you might be interested in. Really personalized around my channels and everything you might want to add yourself across the different devices, obviously. Same setup. You want to make it easy. Again, the mullet approach. As a design agency, we used to say, like, no tutorial should be needed. It should be so simple that you can just use it. At the same time, we want to know more about you as fast as we can, so we had an onboarding process, right? Please let us know what it is you like. Do you have existing playlists? What can we import that is of value to you to jump the gun and really create the most personal, frictionless experience? Eventually all the way to see the watch list you would like to import, and then the interest that you may have. And then you're ready to go. So this still takes you only like 2 minutes, and then it's already a better experience than anything you've ever had. Now, we can ask people what their interests are, what they would like to see. That's not the same as true innovation. Innovation is a paradigm shift. Nobody knows that they want it. Famous example of the iPhone, right? Nobody thought they needed anything else from a phone than just calling. Turns out we do. It's one of my favorite examples of leapfrogging. Nintendo Wii, 2006. At this time, technology was the rage in gaming consoles. Competition from Microsoft, Sony, big tech companies that were just like in an arms race to make the most powerful gaming computers that ever existed. The PlayStation 3 had enough computing power to guide a nuclear missile. Nobody needs that, right? It's not what the gaming environment is about. And Disney knew that, or Nintendo knew that. And so they focused on the gaming element. How can we change gaming forever, make it more accessible to young people, to people who are never got used to the controllers, the mechanisms of gaming, and they came up with a gesture sensing device, which is the Nintendo Wii. Massive success, even though the technology at the time was nowhere near mature, nowhere near well-known or well-distributed. They took the risk and, of course, paid off big for them. The paradigm shifts, making that possible throughout the 20th century, from 1950 with mainframe computing all the way to cognitive computing today, which is AI-driven. These are the big shifts that allow for new experiences for individual people, specifically now with AI-driven, big data-based computing experiences. Now, to go back to Disney, they figured, okay, we need to tap into the technology community. We don't know everything internally because we're a media company. So how do we stay connected into the ecosystem? And so they set up an accelerator. They worked with Techstars to reach out to the entrepreneurial community and make sure that they sort of kept track of new business models, new applications that they could then incorporate, either acquire or collaborate or something like that. And here's a little bit, a short clip of Bob Iger, the CEO, explaining why.
With a new world order, with changes that are occurring in our marketplace every day that will have profound effects on our businesses long term, the better off we are.
And at Arcadis, where I currently work, that's a similar approach we take. The answer is most likely not in the room, so we have to tap into the entrepreneurial community. We've also signed with Techstars to set up an accelerator program for us for the next 3 years. So that's an example of collaboration with startups, other organizations, as well as corporates. But tech companies still have the edge, right? They do everything in-house. They understand all this. So the second thing you need to do is not just keep track of technologies that are relevant now, what startups do, but what's coming. Louise mentioned it as well, anticipation, the future is already here. The big tech companies know that. So on their roadmap, the future computing platform for Facebook is VR, AR. AI will create all the value, and connectivity is what they depend on, right? So everybody should sign up for their service. They're basing it on the Gartner hype cycle of emerging technologies. This is very much a visualization of the level of hype for a certain technology and the level of maturity where they're currently at. And there's, of course, a disconnect there. Something can be really hyped, but still 10 years out in terms of reaching a plateau of capabilities. There's some really interesting stuff on there. But if you look at mixed reality, augmented reality, VR, AR, Of course, Facebook is really going after that because they want that to be the next platform. It's probably more intimate, more social. So they bought Oculus a couple of years ago for a couple of billion, and now they came up with a really low-end, low-priced device that they hope will lead to mass adoption of VR. Let's wait and see if people actually want that. AI is their value creator, so of course, heavily investing in that as well. This is a glimpse of the home experience that they're
One of the best things about Jarvis is it could recognize people at the gate, let them in automatically, and then just tell me about it.
Mark, your parents are coming in.
Thanks, Jeffrey.
It's Jarvis.
And Jarvis can play all of our favorite music. Hey, play us some good Nickelback songs.
I'm sorry, Mark. I'm afraid I can't do that. There are no good Nickelback songs.
Yes, so apparently computers know more about our taste than we do. This is the Holy Grail, of course. So aside from those specific technologies and what they can do, AI in general, generic AI, of course, way more than 10 years out still, but that's what all these companies are going after, because that's the optimal way to create value. Now, I was a contributor to Fast Company. I wrote this article, A Designer's Guide to the AI Industry, because we want to create the right experiences for people, knowing that it's a delicate balance. If you think about Alexa, for example, you don't want to come home and have Alexa starting to talk to you. So it's a policy at Amazon to not do that, to not create experiences that are proactive. It's reactive, it's Q&A based, because otherwise people get freaked out. It might be a point in time where they start doing that because people are used to it and they would want that kind of interaction from a machine. But at this point, it's very much just like, I have a question, what's the weather going to be like tomorrow? You get an answer. But AI, from that perspective, can be really scary. We don't want everything taken care of for us. So one way of dealing with that is kind of like having different settings, like you would have on a sports car. Right? You would have a sports mode or road mode or track mode. And depending on the setting, AI will take care of everything. As long as there's an opportunity to turn AI off and be fallible, right? Be human, make mistakes. We don't want everything taken care of for us. The mundane stuff, maybe, right? Certain tasks that you go like, okay, just arrange it, make sure I have my groceries, make sure whatever, and they can do that. But certain experiences I want to do myself, I want to make mistakes, etc. We will discover that pretty soon. Now, I look at the clock, I will skip this video, but MIT recently announced their launch of a college for AI with a $1 billion corporate gift. It was a corporate and an individual gift. So Steven Schwartzman, who is the founder of the Blackstone Group, major private equity firm, understand the multidisciplinary nature of AI. And so they provided a $1 billion donation to MIT to set up a separate college, which integrates all the different disciplines. It's not computer science. It's very much the humanities, social sciences, all of that, political science that you want to plug into the concept of AI to make things more human, more relevant for society, etc. So I'm going to skip through this one. This is about my work at MIT at the Media Lab. The Media Lab is what they call an anti-disciplinary research department, not even multidisciplinary. Basically what they're looking for is people who don't fit in a particular box. Right? So in the traditional academic disciplines, you are a specialist in a really small area, and you are the guru globally in that particular piece because you want to advance knowledge of humanity, and that requires dedication to a specific niche. Well, the Media Lab is all about collaboration between disciplines and hybrid profiles and all of that. And they look at the future technologies and the creativity behind them. So this was kind of how things got started back in 1986. The combination of computing and communication, as we know it now and expected to evolve in the decades ahead, will vastly expand human creative capacity. Again, not about the technologies, but about what humans can do with it and what it can do for humans. So they look a little bit further out in terms of technologies and their level of maturity, as well as the pre-hype stuff. For example, Google Glass was patented out of the Media Lab in 1998, and it took another 13, 14 years for it to reach the market, and even then, it was too soon, right? The backlash people thought was going to walk around with stuff like that. So here's an example of human augmentation at the Media Lab. Really rudimentary prototype, but it shows sort of where we're headed. Scary, right? We're going to have extra fingers. 4D printing. They're exploring not just 3D printing, but 4D printing is a shape that can shift and change over time. depending on circumstances, depending on use cases, all of that. So this is just in water to alleviate the gravity, but that pre-programmed shape, so going from state A to state B, that demonstrates the principle. Because digital, to a greater and greater extent, which is also why I joined Arcadis, is getting physical. That's the future of digital. Again, looking at the time, this is another principle that follows the same notion of a changing physical shape that is pre-programmed, or can be programmed, or reprogrammed. These cubes are an inch by an inch by an inch. Think about what it looks like if it's molecular level, right? If you can change anything into anything theoretically. And we're still about 20, 30 years away from that, but programmable matter, programmable material will change everything around us. So Media Lab is a place not just for different disciplines to come together, but it's very much government, university, private sector, corporate, startup, they're all involved. So this is a list of the sponsors they have. And the Media Lab's budget every year is only partly funded by MIT, and everything else comes from corporates and government initiatives. So there's the army on there and a few other examples, but also the big tech companies and the traditional industries. So, and what do you get from it? You get IP, you get knowledge transfer. Everything that happens there is open. You can recruit students, which is of course really valuable in that environment as well, cross-disciplinary collaboration, and make business connections. So that's what they do really well. Of course, the link with government, this is Joey Ito, he heads up the Media Lab. Very, very important to look at, okay, what are the implications for society, what should we be focusing on, what are we learning, providing that feedback, etc., and having that strong connection, not just financially, but also in how we work together. And it doesn't just end with research and prototyping, it really needs to have an impact on society eventually. So of course they also connect to the startup community. So they have a program in place, they have a fund, this is the E14, that's the name of the building, a fund to support startups that leverage technologies that get developed there, or use cases. And MIT developed something called the engine to make sure that their knowledge, or everything they work on, eventually makes it to market. And this is the front end of a number of different initiatives. This is an overview here of everything MIT does with startups, with technology transfer, with corporates, and they make sure that, that it comes together in an innovation initiative that brings things to market. And of course, that's a specific environment, but we can mimic that anywhere else in the world, right? It's not because they have the brand recognition that they get to do all that. You can mimic this approach, which is, of course, what has been happening in academic institutions globally anyway. But you need startups, you need corporates, you need everything in between. You need research, theoretical research and applied research. And keep the balance, because you have different value to add to the equation. If you think about AI scientists, can anybody guess what the going rate is for an AI professor from Carnegie Mellon, Stanford, or MIT to join the big tech companies? Ballpark number. And that's the real challenge. Because of the commercialization of technologies like AI, you get the biggest gap ever. Because however ideological you are as a scientist, if you're offered $10 million a year, right, everybody has their price. So let's make sure that we each get our angle in that big, complicated, multidisciplinary puzzle. And I would like to encourage you to think about how you can best contribute to that puzzle. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Now I learned a little bit. I used my manual and I know how to use application.
There you go.
It's very useful, actually. Yeah, very useful. And the positive side is that actually now we have a questions.
Ah, yes.
Can we see the question on the screen now? I will start with a very simple question, which is, what is your favorite Disney star?
Disney star?
Yes.
Ooh, well, from the cartoons or the movies? The movies, I would say Pirates of the Caribbean, Jack Sparrow. From the cartoons, it's The Lion King, Mufasa.
Okay, but now being a little bit more serious, I have a question. What will come after the design thinking?
So design thinking is a research process, and then eventually you end up with something that is the optimum between the three lenses.
Yeah, you have the human in the center, but will it remain forever?
Will it remain forever that the human's at the center of the experience? I think so. Yeah.
Sure.
I'm very sure, because eventually it's about our own lives, and we like to maximize our comfort. We like to maximize our efficiency, effectiveness, and computers will help us do that. And in the past, it was mostly about corporates as entities providing those kinds of experiences. And with the technology we have in our hands right now, I think the iPhone 4 or 5 had an equal amount of computing power as the computer that landed the Apollo 11 modular on the moon. So with that kind of power, we can expect to be served, so we can focus on being human and no longer have to worry about technology or business.
Yes, thank you. Let's see the questions. There is, I will take in the middle. Will the world get better with, if we could stop the big six and allow the others to come and grow?
It's a tricky one.
Anti-monopoly law should need it.
Yes, but this is a perfect example of how convenience beats all. So if you look at Airbnb, right? As consumers, we love Airbnb because we get different experiences at a lower price point. Anywhere in the world, it's unique, it's tailored, it's customized, it feels great. As people living in a city, having to rent or buy real estate, we hate it. Right? Because it's all the damn tourists driving up prices, etc. So it's a double-edged sword. Same is true for the real big tech companies. We hate the fact that we share our data, that they know everything about us, that they become so powerful. Yet we love what they do. Right? As consumers, it's an amazing experience. So a regulation follows innovation. So I'm sure they'll be curbed somehow to not be too powerful, because they do a lot of things better than even governments do, and governments don't like that. So eventually they will be stopped in some way or another, but we speak with our usage, and it shows that we love the big six.
Thank you. There is an interesting question which is very, very close to our theme for this conference. What is your main suggestion for companies if they come to researchers? What should companies, it's a question.
Well, so they need to collaborate because the world's moving faster. Technology is coming down the pipeline faster. Development happening quicker and quicker. So unless you are anticipating what's possible with those technologies, you'll be obsolete as a company. So by definition, universities, because of their different kind of interest, they're more focused on whatever the future brings. And so looking at technologies and what's the potential there is by definition something universities can do, even if it includes the human elements of it in the form of research. So it's the commercialization or the application of knowledge, which is where the two meet. So companies, of course, rely heavily on research, and they shouldn't do everything in-house. They should leverage the fact that institutions like this one are actually meant to do that.
Yeah, thank you. And the question about the future again. What could be the future of media consumptions in 2030? Going from streaming to...
It will be a lot more physical. We will be less of couch potatoes, I guess. So it's not looking at a screen at home. It's very much all around you. You will have a personalized experience.
You can be Jack Sparrow yourself.
Exactly, yeah. Yeah, it's in a different world. It's a tailored experience. You see this in movies, and usually we tend to follow whatever is portrayed in movies. Like if you walk around somewhere, the way you like it, you want the environment to know about you, no matter where you are. Things like that will happen. Interesting thing for streaming still, though, is in the Netflix stock price is already priced in that in the next 5 years, we will have some level of autonomous vehicles, and we will use that time that we save from driving for watching Netflix. So that tells us what people like to do and how, quote unquote, lazy we actually are. But yeah, going out and about in the physical space, I think, is coming towards 2030.
Yes, and if you can scroll down a little bit, there was one question actually which was also aimed to Louise. It's about what it was, how technology and innovation will change traditional industries. And if I may ask also Louise to, I'll take the microphone for Louise, yes, please. If you both can answer on this one, because it's important to know what the company should do.
So I'll invade your stage now, Patrick.
Please do.
But I think what we often, when we talk about technology and innovation, we talk about startups, but there's so much going on in the traditional industries as well. I'm working a lot with the banking sector, and oh my, is this development going fast there. So we're seeing a huge trend in all sectors. And it doesn't matter whether you're a doctor or you're a lawyer or you're working in a bank, it's going to change so fast. So we can't just sit down, any of us, and just keep doing whatever we've been doing for all of our lives.
Yeah, well, it is already changing a lot. It has changed a lot. It's going faster and faster. My favorite combination to mention is, what if we have quantum computing with a shitload of more data? And really powerful AI technologies. That's 1,000 times or 10,000 times or more as powerful and as impactful. No idea how that actually will affect our industries, but in terms of the big shift, very much from a company deciding what they want to make and guessing what you like to real-time feedback from people like, no, this is not relevant. You play no role in my life. That's really the biggest change.
But I also think the interesting thing with technology is that we are not having quantum computing and AI and genome technology. We are having complementary technologies. And this is why it's going so fast now, that we're starting to see that they're working together and they're complementary. So the more we know about our genome, that helps us innovate in the banking sector and in the health sector and so on.
You already mentioned that there are also changes in the learning, how the learning should be done. What do you think, what will be in the learning the most important thing for our schools, universities? What we should change?
Well, when it comes to student learning, it's definitely the customization. I was talking to an engineering professor the other day, and he told me that he had been doing the same lectures for years and years and years. And he had the students rate him like after every lecture, and he just saw the ratings go down, 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 down. And he was like, "Okay, I'm doing the same thing. Why is it going down?" And then he started asking the students, and they were like, "Why should we go to an auditorium and listen to you if we can just YouTube it?" And when he started to reverse his teaching, and he asked the students to go YouTube whatever they want and then come to class and experiment, and then he would do the different experiments with them. They just loved it and they learned so much and their grades exploded. So this whole idea of moving away from this learning as all of us did in school to this customization and this whole lifelong training is going to be the deal breaker for education.
This is a challenge. I don't have any. I have a couple of videos on YouTube. But okay, thank you so much. Thank you, Louise, and thank you, Patrick, too.
Thank you, Anders.
And please give a big hand to our keynotes.
Thank you.